Yep, Andrew McQualter is going to be a premiership coach for West Coast. G'day from the West, Lucas here, and welcome back to Footy West. And okay, it's a bit early to be saying all these big one-liners, but I'm convinced. I am convinced that Andrew McQualter is the man for West Coast, and we'll talk about a few things today that make me think this way. Before we get into it, if you like what you see, like, subscribe, hit the post notification bell. You guys know the drill by now. But yeah, I'll get straight into it, and there's a few things, like I mentioned, that really make me think that he is the man for the Eagles. And straight off the top, I've noticed in particular, and I think a few other people have noticed as well, is that he is a very, very good speaker. And he's probably been hidden a bit from the media in a way, which I actually think in some ways is a good thing for him. And I know a lot of fans want the club to be a bit more transparent and show a bit more inside sort of content from the club. But I don't think it's a bad thing, and I don't think it's done any harm at all to sort of shelter him away from the media. It got a bit crazy. Well, not a bit. I think it got really crazy towards the end of Adam Simpson's time. Obviously, the West Australian probably a big factor in that. But I think it was a great decision to sort of keep him away until the season started. And now that we've seen a couple interviews from him, a couple speaking segments from him, I think he's a very good speaker. And that, it's a little thing, right? It doesn't seem like a big thing. But if you have a well-spoken coach who can articulate his words to not only the fans, but the players especially, is very important in a football side. I noticed it particularly at the season launch event that was held last week, and I think that goes a long way. And so we've had a few things to sort of look at and gauge how he's going, what he's setting up within the West Coast Eagles four walls. And we've seen obviously the season launch, and then a clip today from Ryan Daniels in a 7 News exclusive interview. And I've noticed that he's really got I think he's got a good understanding of the game. And I think he understands the modern game, what needs to be done to win games of football in this day and age. It's something that perhaps Adam Simpson knew what to do, but could not implement it. And that probably wasn't necessarily all his fault. Obviously, a lot of the players were stuck in those old ways, with him obviously still at the helm and the premiership, the way they won that. So I think that's important, and I think it's important that Andrew McQualter has sort of changed the club on its head, and he's got a really good understanding of the modern football game. And obviously West Coast needed a coach to guide them through this period of time. It's a very sort of, I'll say, unique phase for the club. Obviously they are down at the bottom, so I think you definitely needed a good rebuild coach. And at first I wasn't actually sure how well Andrew McQualter could cope with a rebuilding side, but he has proven me wrong in those thoughts. I actually think he's going to be a very good rebuild coach, and from some of the things that he has said, I think he understands where the club is at. He knows that they're not going to be contending for a flag this year. The sides that he's coached in, he was with Richmond down the bottom, but also towards the end at the Heights, which was something that was bearing in the back of my mind. Maybe he's only suited for, like, saying, taking the Sydney job. But he's learned, he's probably learning as well as much as the players are. But he knows where the West Coast Eagles are as a club. He knows he needs to take them back to the top. And I think he's going to implement his own ways to make that happen. And to do that, obviously, you've got to make your game styles. And I'm going to insert a clip here. He spoke about it in the season launch, but also in this little interview he's got going with Ryan Daniels. And this is something that really caught my eye.
Your game plan that you are bringing in and implementing at the club, is it as simple as saying run and gun or fast and furious?
Fast and furious, I like it. I hadn't heard that
use
one.
That.
No, look, it's not that simple at all. And I think it's potentially even been misconstrued a little bit, because ultimately to win games you need to be able to have multiple modes. We can't just be all out fast and attack the whole time. So we're trying to build a well-rounded game plan, but the requirements of AFL at the moment is you have to be really fast. Offensively, defensively, the way you think. So we're trying to instill that into our players, but we have to be able to attack in many ways as well.
So he's sort of speaking about, obviously, the game style that West Coast are going to play. They want to play that fast run and gun, but it's important to note that you can't play that all the time. And I think that's very important, an important understanding for a coach to have. Obviously, you want to be going as fast as you can all the time, but the game doesn't allow that to happen all the time. Sometimes you've got to defend, sometimes you've got to control. And so by the sounds of things there, it looks like Andrew McQualter understands this. He's got it in his head. He wants to play this style as much as he can, but he's allowed and he's got ideas and tactics for when you can't play that style. And I think he's just driving the standards up at the club. I saw something about his first day or the first day of preseason or something like that, and he said, we're driving up our standards. We got to be high. We got to compete. So that's the way it should be. And standards sort of dropped to an extent at the end of sort of last season before that, the dreadful 2023 season. Probably not all the fault of like the coaching staff. Obviously there were a lot of injuries, so standards weren't necessarily high enough to warrant like a selection pressure. But driving up the standards is so important in a footy club, and you see all these premiership sides throughout the last few years. They have had high standards within themselves. They have had selection pressure. If you do not perform, you are gone. So standards is the number one thing in a footy club.
Andrew McQualter has probably put standards on a whiteboard and circled it a million times.
And I also think they're taking more time sort of with selection choices and selection pressure. We've heard a couple times now in the build up to round one that he's still not set on a round one side. I mean, you've got your ruckman fighting for position. I think he said he's still not sure about the number one ruck position. I reckon that's probably going to go to Matt Flynn now, and probably I'd say they're leaning towards Archer Reed as a second ruck. Jack Williams would probably be just ahead for me, but I think they're both very good prospects for us. So in that regard, I think it's a positive that they're taking so much thought into the selection, because I'm not gonna lie, we got selection wrong quite a few times last year and many times throughout 2023. Again, it was injuries, there wasn't much to choose from, but towards last year when we did have a healthier list, I think we got selection wrong quite a few times. Probably not cost us some games, but costed us the margins in the games. We lost a game sort of by 50 points that we could have lost maybe by 20. So that's another really important thing in a football side, is selecting the right side based on your opponent, based on the conditions, based on the ground. And I think by the sounds of it and by the looks of it, Andrew McQualter is taking a lot of time into thinking about these sides and thinking who lines up best, who is best 23 for this match. And I think it's very important to select the right side. And lastly, you sort of got to touch on the off-field stuff, because as much as you need to be a good coach on field, you also have to be a good coach off-field.
That sounded very philosophical. I was really proud of that.
But to make a good on-field coach, you have to be a good man off the field. And we saw it with Adam Simpson. He was a very lovable guy off the field, put family first, sort of made a family sort of club, and he took time to spend with the players and sort of bonding like that. And I think Andrew McQualter is very similar. I think he's got quite a good sense of humour. We saw in his press conference first up when he was hired, and you sort of see that rubbing off on the guys. They look like they enjoy playing under him, and that is certainly to some extent a result of his off-field behaviours and his off-field manners. He said he's taken some time away from the club to sort of get to know a lot of these players, because he's never worked with any of them before. And that's sort of another positive to touch on, is the fact that he is disconnected from the club in a way when he was brought in. And so there's no sort of mates rates, boys club going on. But he's taken the time away from the club to get to know these players, and that produces a great sort of player-coach relationship. And if he can do that for the better part of the list, then that goes a long way into furthering his coaching journey. So I suppose without even coaching a game, you can sort of see what Andrew McQualter is trying to do, and things are looking up in terms of his journey. Now, he has said, and like we all know, it's not going to happen instantly. These things are not going to click straight away. He's going to need to work on quite a few things, but the thing that comes to my attention is the fact that it looks like I can see a way out. Like I can see a way towards back up to the top again. And that's something that I haven't seen in the last couple of years. So it's exciting as a fan of the West Coast Eagles to be able to look forward to this again. And that's happened on the back of the hiring of Andrew McQualter. And it makes you sort of wonder why Richmond didn't hang on to him. But it's probably too early to judge Adam Uze yet. Obviously, he's only been in 1 year. He's got a very, very young list. Injuries as well last year didn't do him any favours. So it's probably too early to judge him. But you got to look at the both of them and think, well, Andrew McQualter was a big loss for them. Adam Uze could end up winning them a couple premierships in 5 or 6, 10 even years' time. So you never know. But that's in the back of your mind if you're a Richmond fan, I would think. Because Andrew McQualter looks like a very good hire for West Coast. But that is everything for today. I think Andrew McQualter is the man for West Coast. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. But that is all for today. If you enjoyed, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on the post notification bell. And yeah, I hope to see you again back soon on Footy West.